welcome to another episode of Ideaprov. I'm your host, Mike Pedersen. I have a really unique guest here today that we connected online and had some really great conversations, even quite a bit of a long one before we get started here. But his name is Chris, and he comes to us and is just unapologetically curious. Chris helps groups solve problems, makes decisions, and learn in a fun and engaging way. He believes organizations have all that they need to solve their own strategy, marketing, innovation, and organizational problems, and his role is to help them discover and implement them through engaging and impactful workshops and events. So, Chris, I gave us a little bit about you. How are you? What's life like? Explain to us who you are in your own words.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. Well, it's funny. So this will be 2 episodes in a row where you have a collaboration designer on.
That is correct.
Yeah. So Taylor Cohn was right before this. An awesome guy, and he was using the term collaboration designer. I haven't used that myself, but he's right. I think that is a good way to put it. On my LinkedIn profile, I say I'm a farmer of collaboration. Which is essentially helping teams work better together. More specifically, creating the conditions for teams or groups of people to solve a problem, innovate, ideate, make a decision on equal footing.
You were talking about just the collaboration designer function, that whole piece of it. And I know that you do this and just kind of started a new venture. I think it's called Flash 15. So let us know what's that about.
Yeah, Flash 15 is a new training program for groups, teams, organizations that essentially help teams develop better relationships and trust through micro 15-minute workshops that they can spread out over a series of days and actually fold into their daily routines and make it a habit. But instead of one large workshop where you go over team building or team development or innovation principles, fold it in and make it a habit. That makes sense.
Yeah. So now these are more virtual events, I would anticipate right now. But what is the feedback that people are giving you about? What are they getting out of this? I'm sure it's got to be some really profound, interesting things that, people are saying in 15 minutes, what can you really pack in? But I'm sure that, if it's being received well, you definitely have to have some positive feedback, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some quotes, actually on my marketing, one of them is from a design manager of, I can't believe what relationships we built in 15 minutes, things like that. But ultimately, I think, have you ever been on a dysfunctional team?
Yes.
Okay.
I think almost everybody has at some point, whether it's a high school project or whatever. Somebody's doing all the work while everybody else is slacking off. I don't know.
Right. So honestly, teams, just by spending the 15 minutes to kind of do a creative project together where you break down the barriers. We've reported that people are happier, they feel more connected to their teams after a series of these short workshops. We always bake in skills and practices or mindsets that they can activate right away. And it slowly helps them develop new ways of seeing and solving problems, right? So it's really just based on a way that I like to learn. I mean, I think trust and innovation can be such a vague term that I think if we can slowly introduce these concepts, it's actually more productive and more effective, and the results seem to be trending that way.
Yeah, so I'm interested in I guess maybe other people would be as well, is 15 minutes seems short, right? And it really is. Like, you're talking just like, how much do people really get in that 15 minutes, right? Like, I'm sure there's some tangible takeaways. You're probably doing maybe an activity or two. Do you go back for multiple sessions? Is that the thing? Or is it just like that one and you're taken away and really good?
No, I mean, the minimum is 10. So maybe you could do one a week, or you could do one a day. But yeah, it's a series of sessions to create that habit of, well, we introduce different concepts, but introducing these activities and structures that can help their team work better with this practice.
Yeah. How many, out of curiosity, like how many, I guess, people or can do these at the same time?
We've done up to 40. And we get them in. It's intense. It's fun. Like, it's really stressful, but I mean, it's fun. We still follow like the standard workshop design of like having an opening, an exploration of like emergent ideas period, and then a closing, right? And you can fit it into 15 minutes. You just have to be very disciplined, and like, if anything, it's a great Trojan horse for like teaching facilitation too. So I mean, you can get, I think it's really powerful. But you know, you can go over concepts like psychological safety, or different ideation practices, or even like understanding your customers better, and like in these 15-minute sessions, right? And maybe you won't come out with like within this 15-minute session, you might come up with some like world-changing solution, but it'll give you the mindset and skills and the structures that you could use later. There's a lot of people I mean, this collaborative work is so different it's such a different way to work than most people are accustomed to, and you have to gradually like expose it to them.
Yeah, I could see a lot of people that might be a little bit more reserved in the thinking, and maybe potentially cynical, and say, hey, how much am I really going to get out of this? But considering there's multiple sessions, like, you're going to get some value there, so where can people kind of find out more about it and kind of dive into it a little bit further if they wanted to procure the services?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's really on my LinkedIn and Meetup pages. I run a Meetup community, a design thinking Meetup community. I haven't built out some like Flash 15 web page or anything yet. If they can contact me, my LinkedIn handle is Chris Federer, and we can go from there. But
Sweet.
We're testing it and with clients, and it's going pretty well.
I want to bring apart, just speaking of kind of Chris's ideas here, bring and open up the topic for discussion for today, which is, we're talking and thinking about just society as a whole, and we're saying, how can we emphasize and, I guess, idolize group creation instead of individual creations to promote faster change? So what kind of brought me initially to this topic was, I was thinking, right now you see a lot of people that are just, I guess maybe from a generational perspective, are just trending in the more individual creation perspective, right? So you have TikTokers, you have YouTube, you have all these kind of people that are making really good money and doing some creative things. However, when you're talking about systems and the way things change, whether it's politics or healthcare or any of these larger platforms that affects many people as a whole, it would seem to me like it kind of makes more sense to get a few more people involved and push the idea of, hey, if we work together for a common purpose.
Well, what about this Hype House? What about Hype House?
Hype House. Tell me about Hype House.
Well, I'm no expert. So I didn't know the conversation was going to go this way in terms of like social media and like building your brand. Like
Doesn't have to.
Things like that, which is with the Hype House, like on TikTok, the kids, they're a group of kids in California that were social media influencers on TikTok and then got together and combined their forces to create content together. And like I said, I'm no expert, but like it's kind of an interesting thing where you did see these people these kids building out their personal brand and then moved into this mansion together. And like why they decided to do it and if it's going to continue to work. And I know other variations have come up like that, or variations on the Hype House, but we'll start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good avenue, a good basis to start from, because the general perception sometimes can be that large institutions just aren't trustworthy, right? They don't have the actual interest. They don't listen to the people. They don't apply to me. They don't have my best interests at heart, right? Whether you're talking about social organizations in government, like they don't think it all the way through. There's bureaucracy, there's red tape, or larger companies that are all about the money, always about the bottom line. Like, how do we create either it's smaller groups or just groups that are better geared towards making change from groups instead of the individual? And I mean, my first thought. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just to clarify, you started bringing up systems. So, do you want to go down like it within corporate world?
I think we could do a little bit of both, right? I mean, just probably got to do it pretty quickly, but
part of my belief or my hypothesis is that we're now living in this relationship economy, and like customers demand, like they want what they want when they want it. Mm-hmm. And it's so complex. And at least coming from a system, the only way you can really meet their needs is by working extremely well together. It's just impossible for one person to meet those needs. So it's that like today's reality demands that at least to excel and to win in the future is that today's reality demands that teams break down the silos and start communicating a little bit better and taking advantage of their skill sets to provide solutions that customers actually want. So I mean, and I bring this up just because like there's this whole like digital transformation movement, and people are like, what is this? And I actually don't have a good definition about it, but like Jeremiah finally just says like this, and digital transformation, essentially what we're talking about is just like how teams are working together. It's a change in how teams work, so it's another teamwork issue. I guess I'll leave it there. So I was gonna say that these these more like vertical organizations, siloed vertical organizations, I just don't know if they're going to survive in the first place. So it might, and if they do, it'll be interesting to see how they do. But I think they're going to get blindsided if they haven't already.
Yeah, I think there's a good portion of it because, well, one, because of the pandemic, they're being forced to, right? And so coming to that conclusion on your own that we need an uptick in our tech as a utility is a little bit different when you're being forced to do it versus when you want to do it. Now, that said, if it has to be done, it has to go back.
Do you think they're going to?
I don't know if they're going to go back, but I think it feels to me like maybe some companies might do the bare minimum. Just enough to be able to get through this little cycle and move it through. I'd like to think that this would be a really good opportunity for a lot of, large companies to create that change, create that momentum to be able to move things in a positive direction, right? to say, hey, let's look at our business or our systems holistically and say, what areas can we remove things from, so that way we can create a better team dynamic and create better solutions as a small unit versus having individual people push their own agendas, right? Or having dated systems or dated technology. Like, can we reevaluate the way that we're doing things? I think some will and some have. But I guess that's where I want to kind of open up the conversation, because I feel like there's some people that will push it individually, right? But then how do we get more people to view the ideas of the team versus the ideas of the individual in a more healthy way moving forward?
Yeah, I guess I have a couple thoughts. I guess, how are teams getting rewarded? Like, how do you get promoted? Do you get promoted by stabbing someone in the back and taking their idea and boasting about it? Or, it's a little bit longer term thinking, but organizations or enterprises tend to make a lot more money. When it comes down to it, tend to make a lot more money when they take a little bit more of a de-siloed, collaborative approach to problem solving. You get solutions out in the world faster, and you can test them faster, and you tend to get better.
Yeah, so I want to touch on, before we get to the de-siloed portion of it, because I think that's big, but that reward system that you were talking about. Let's say we're in large company A, right? Has 100,000 people in it. Maybe people work in small groups or functions or departments of 25 or 50 or whatever the case is, 100. Like, how would that reward, hypothetically, what would that reward system look like, right? If we were going to focus for the good of the group, right? So if you maybe have a team of 5, is it something that you just promote that whole team? You give them a bonus based on if their collaboration and the output that they're creating as a team is the most beneficial and impactful. I don't know, I'm interested to hear like your thought process around what that reward system could potentially look like. Is it individualistic reward? Team rewards?
No, for me, like, I would have that team go around and help train other teams on how they were doing things so good or so well. I think so it's almost like a change in role. It's like, wow, you guys are high performing. How did you do that? Teach everyone else how to do that. Well, I also have a belief that just like the skill of the future is going to be people that can facilitate groups of people and help them connect the dots. I mean, that's how you get promoted, by developing that skill set of being able to really help people work through really complex problems.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part, because I think what a lot of people might not understand is oftentimes when they have conflicts, whether it's within their department and on their immediate teams, it's usually because somebody's not seeing what somebody else is seeing, right? And having that ability to have those two people see the same thing is probably the most important skill that you can develop, is alignment. Now, that's not to say that some conflicts aren't warranted. There's good conflict where people have, positive ideas, and a lot can come from that. However, if the same goal is there, getting aligned can really speed up the process, right? Everybody's in the same fashion, everybody's in the same vein. You can really start cranking out good, solid output. But at the same time, you don't want everybody to just be like crony wooden soldiers following in line. So where's that balance, right? Does that mean time boxing the certain situations when you do have that conflict, so that way you can move forward at a faster clip, and be willing to iterate, and change and pivot if things don't go as intended?
I'm a big fan of time boxing. I got into facilitation and doing enterprise workshops. I started with design sprints, and a design sprint is a process of, the traditional design sprint is a 5-day process to help teams explore a problem, like prototype a solution, and then test it with users. And it became wildly popular just because I don't think like that was like the fastest teams had really worked before. They couldn't believe how much they were able to get done and how much they were able to learn within 5 days together, right? And not only that, but like having everyone on the same page, having everyone get on the same page on those 5 days, even if it wasn't the best solution, made it a lot easier to decide what was next, or if it was a good solution that they came up with, like actually development and get it out of the world faster. So yeah, I believe in I still believe in time-boxed co-creation activities.
To pivot a little bit, you were talking about de-siloing the way that people work, right? And oftentimes in the larger scheme of things, larger company, the larger system, the more people that you get, the more individual things start to split apart. So how do we get people kind of working in the same fashion and have that work not be all siloed out? I mean, first thing to me is, of course, there's some older models of ways to get people on the same page, like a company newsletter, right? Or some type of community board for the team where everybody sees the same goals. All those are great, and of course they've been updated a little bit, so you have things like Basecamp and Slack and different electronic tools that people can use now. But part of me thinks that these are potentially masking like a bigger problem where people aren't fundamentally looking at teamwork, right? Like we're all the same team. I have a tendency to think that person X in a higher position came up with the idea, it makes the most sense, let's all run with it. Not knowing that person X and person Y in a different department is going in a completely different path and there's no communication there. How do we get that communication, I guess? Because everybody hates meetings, right?
You can run panarchy. What's it? Panarchy, the liberating structure, where essentially you go and, I mean, you would pick like team leaders from throughout the company and maybe have them look at the company from different viewpoints of like their team and their management. You can go as high up to macroeconomic systems. But I think even having team leaders work through something like that, so they know they aren't stepping on each other's feet, or they're kind of rowing in the same direction, or they can ask like what they need from other teams.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful like if everybody put their cards on the table, right? And almost worked more openly in what they're doing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was making that assumption. Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, it's funny. It's not that easy. I mean, it comes back to like it can be scary. Like working open, you have to be more transparent. You have to be willing to make mistakes and look like people can get scared. I've heard stories of people or teams working on things and it's not going that well, but they won't tell anyone else in the organization about it because they're afraid. And then all of a sudden it's been a year and it's like, what happened? They're like, oh yeah, it's just been a disaster. Like once they lifted up the hood on their project. So openness to communicate across the organization. Yeah, that takes a level of trust and openness to failure that a lot of organizations and enterprises aren't okay with.
Yeah, I mean, is it as simple as maybe an organization develops a person or a role on each team, and their exclusive job is to communicate with the rest of the office so everybody stays on the same page? I mean, but then there's part of me that says, do we pull it back because that's just a big giant game of telephone?
Passing, instead of getting in the room together and discussing in like a structured format. I'm going to say structured, so it's not like, otherwise it's just chaos, because I think organizations try to do this, but it just turns into chaos because they don't know how to structure their gathering or their meeting properly, right? And people end up hating meetings. So, you know, I'm going to go back to, maybe they just don't know how to properly structure their meetings in a way that gets them to an outcome of like, hey, what is going on? We want to make sure we aren't working on completely random things over here. Let's get on the same page here. Have you been a part of like some huge, you work at a pretty large organization. Have you been a part of like some company-wide alignment initiative?
Yeah, it was...
What's that look like?
It was interesting. So I'll take you back to a different company. I at one time I worked for Nordstrom. So really large retailer, all across the country. And every morning, I don't know if they still do, but they have a gathering, and pretty much it's everybody, anybody from the back of house to the stock people to salespeople on the floor, all the way up to that particular store manager. And every single morning before shift, they get together for about 30 minutes and they run through everything. So they run through what yesterday's sales were, you know, what their goals and targets are. And I have mixed reviews on it because there's part of me that says...
But they don't include corporate? They don't include like the regional managers or anything?
Not in the regional managers, because it's actually physically in person at that time. So it was actually everybody from the store right before the store opens at, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning. Everybody jumps on the floor by the escalators at 9:30 and they run through everything. So it's not a full corporate environment, but each individual store is kind of run like that. I've always been very mixed on them because on one hand, I thought it was a good way for everybody to know what was kind of going on, and it made everybody kind of knew what other teams were going after, what the sales target were for their particular, you know, departments or whatever the case is. Even the back of houses, you know, they would let the teams know, hey, a truck of merchandise, you know, is coming in today or it got delayed, so that way the floor people would know, you know, they might not get X and X product. So I think that part was good. There was a little bit of drinking the Kool-Aid, and things kind of got a little stale sometimes, because regardless of how you slice it all, it's almost the same information, right? You're just kind of trying to one-up it from yesterday or one-up it from last year. So the dynamics of that meeting were reasonable, but I can't say that it made me as an individual, and this is my personal belief, really want to, I don't say go all in, but it felt almost like corporately staged at times, you know, and does that really make you want to, you know, go to war and make everybody be on the same page? Yeah, to a certain extent, but
you didn't feel empowered.
You don't always feel empowered. You kind of know what it is that you're going to be doing from day to day. You know, what impactful change am I going to be able to make as an individual? While we're all moving towards the same goal, I get it. As an individual, is there anything that I can do that's going to be looked at in a positive, like, oh, he's a superstar kind of type of deal? And in those settings, you don't necessarily want that. You want everybody to kind of be a superstar, and everybody will, you know, prosper together. But I can see how it can suck the value and suck the fun out of it if you're not in that lens. Yeah, well, what do you think about, this might be challenging depending on the company or the entity or organization, is like a round robin week, right? Where instead of maybe shutting down the company for a whole week, you have everybody just take that week and go follow other people in the company. Just see what they do. Understand, bridge those organizational gaps in knowledge where people can do a day in the life. By doing so, hopefully it would open up new lines of communication. People meet new people. People are able to understand one another. And then that cross-function collaboration can reap benefits later down the road.
Yeah, or are there ways to even, if that's too expensive for organizations, are there other ways to kind of replicate or prototype that type of experience just to even improve that communication or understanding? I mean, it's a little easier nowadays with these digital tools, but I think there could be some ways to replicate actually going around. I could imagine that's a pretty big investment. I'm a little hesitant to go into this topic, but like when I was first thinking about how do we advocate for collaboration is in a past life, I did some rural economic development work internationally. And one of the organizations I worked with, they were tackling extreme rural poverty in places like Nepal, like rural Nepal, Bolivia, Guatemala, rural Mexico, like $2 a day type communities, $1 a day type communities. And they had implemented a process based on, it was a 3-year process to get like a rural community out of extreme poverty. And essentially the plan was to get the upper poor, like the wealthier poor in the community, to see the lower poor in the community as assets rather than liabilities. To then get them to include them in the local economy and even like in the district economy. And essentially all rising tide lifts all boats of a deal. And I don't remember exactly how the process went, but essentially it started off and it worked. It was a very successful program in Nepal, rural Nepal. I don't know if this can work in urban, but the concept, I think the principles, there might be some overlap in principles, even with like corporate America. But the first year was like just understanding the community. They had facilitators go in, meet everyone in the community. Like everyone. Relationship building. And even like writing down like what their values were. And then there was a part of like project-based work. And it wasn't necessarily based on outcomes, but it was just like this concept of like, you build trust by working together. You slowly build trust, right? So then you do these like group community, like small projects and kind of build trust with the community and building, not only like building trust with, the NGO, but also within the community and having them work together. And even inviting in other municipalities. And then the second year, I think was more on the lines of doing a larger project together. It was usually run by women. A few more things, but like at the end of it, at the end of this process, the 3-year process, it was like, they had got people together, got people to talk about their shared values. And then essentially, and they were able to innovate and make just by talking together and including people, they were able to come up with some new solutions to improve their community. But essentially it was just like, hey, upper wealthy villager and family, like instead of, you said one of your Hindu values was compassion, so instead of buying your shoes from the store, that's imported from China, how about you have this person make your shoes for you, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm butchering this. I'm happy to share the link up to the actual process. But I'll never forget that seeing these other members as assets and not liabilities. That's like the key, based on values. And then once you have that common ground, then you can kind of just, okay, you're gonna grow tomatoes, okay, I'm gonna grow beans, and we don't need to import that, we can make this, or we can sell that to that community, right?
Right.
But it took a long time of getting on the same page and building that trust. But it worked. The results have.
Yeah, and it's definitely not something that's built overnight, right? It takes a little bit of time to be able to foster that and have people see firsthand the benefits of working that way.
Yeah, and it's hard. You have to stop and invest in people for the long run, and it's just counterintuitive lots of times. So they really and I think at least in the case of the rural economic development, they really just had to paint the picture of how it will make everyone's lives better.
Yeah, for sure.
How do you do that in the corporate world? It can be, I don't know. I feel like there's elements you can steal from it though. You can get inspiration from that economic development model. I feel like there is. But
it's there.
When you have investors or when you have shareholders, you're supposed to maximize profits. I think that's where some of these organizations get in trouble.
So the corporate profits is where we kind of get into trouble, and I know that's probably a never-ending battle of which people are going to go with, but to kind of bring it all to close, we're going to wrap up and just hit some of the highlights of ways that we can kind of look at group collaboration in a little bit more positive light than individuals, to kind of increase the speed and accuracy for what we're going with. So the first one is look at the reward structure for some of the groups that we have existing, whether it's individual teams and whatever, and find ways to reward the group as a whole, whether it could be just outings or talking to the team and figuring out what they need, what they want, ways that they're able to encourage that productivity and share their knowledge as well. Number 2 is looking at time boxing collaboration, because what that will do is when teams are together, they're able to move quickly, increase the speed, while still staying as accurate as possible. If things don't work out, you can always iterate, pivot, and move on quickly, but at least you're moving the ball forward in some fashion. The third one is some type of cross collaboration. So not necessarily in your individual groups or teams, but finding a way to mix the parties on a regular basis, so that way the communication lines stay open throughout the organization, and people don't end up working in silos, kind of going down their own path to what they believe is success. And then the last part is looking at the people and the teams and the organizations you work with as assets and not necessarily liabilities. So looking at them from a positive light and say, how can they help us achieve our goals, rather than feeding into potentially negative narratives about them or their team or whatever. Did I miss anything there?
Nope, those were the 4 we talked about.
Yeah, perfect. Excellent. Well, I think this was a really good, constructive conversation. was definitely deep in the way that we approached it. And so, Chris, I gotta say thank you for sharing all of your insights, knowledge, and time with us.
Yeah, in my head before this, I was like, I'm gonna make this really fun and like banter and like joke around. I don't think we cracked a smile once.
We were too busy solving everything.
I guess we're trying to work through our gears were grinding.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, we can always do another one. We'll find something, maybe a different lighter topic that'll that we can get the jokes in, because I'm sure we would appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. It was really fun. It's been really great building a relationship with you. Yeah, I love it.
Awesome. Love it. Well, everybody out there, thank you so much for being a part of this episode and listening in. We'll definitely put in all of Chris's information in the show notes. That way you can get a hold of him for Flash 15 or anything else, just to, pick his brain, whatnot. And make sure to stay tuned after the break for our Ideaprov Insight. Hey, for this Ideaprov Insight, I wanted to share with you a article that I found about how to disarm your internal triggers of distraction. So in these uncertain times, I thought this was a good article to share and bring about some ways that you can kind of curb those times in which you may feel that you're getting derailed in your focus. It's a quick 4-step process. One would be look for the discomfort that precedes the distraction. The second one is write down the triggers, so that way you have a little bit of memory of what's causing them. Explore the sensations around the distractions before, during, and after. And then also be aware of the liminal moments. So those are the moments in between you try and take care of activities and duties that can end up spiraling out of control and distracting you even further. So I thought this was a good way to kind of tie in some better mental aspects to the way we work. Thank you. Until next time.